Hi guys, welcome to the Classics Corner. I'm Kat and this week I'm going to talk about reading and classics. More importantly, what you need to read when going into studying classics. Now it's just gone into the summer holidays here in the UK. I know lots of people have gotten their results out from their first year of uni or are planning officially now going into their first year of university. So it's summerish, but you still have enough time in the summer to get some summer reading done. And if you're going into university to study classics or ancient history, here's my advice to you. You need to read a lot. And that might seem quite obvious, like it might seem obvious, oh, I'm going to do a very literature heavy subject, I need to read. Well, I don't think many people realise just how much they need to read and what type of scope they need to be reading in. Lots of people think they're going to study one subject when it comes to ancient history and that's all they can focus on. For example, if they want to study Augustan Rome, they're only going to need to read literature from the Augustan Roman period, so in the first century, late 1st century BC, early 1st century AD, that sort of thing. But that's absolutely not the case, and if you think that's the case, it's gonna give you a bit of a kick in the teeth when you actually get to studying that. Why that is mainly because of a concept called intertextuality. Now, intertextuality features very heavily, at least on my course. It might have just been my department like to focus on that. And intertextuality is the idea that texts do not exist in a vacuum. That an ancient author will always be influenced by something that came before it and reference that work in their work, and therefore you need to have read the earlier work to have a full understanding of the later work. That people used text in a very mobile way when dealing with ancient sources, even back then. And what that means is that, yeah, you need to read a lot. You can't just read the Augustan stuff, you need to read what came before the Augustan stuff that influenced the Augustan stuff, if that makes any sense. The biggest example of that comes from the ancient world with that is that their literature and their memory was not like ours in terms of a modern sense of cultural awareness or memory. If you were an educated Greek or Roman person, you memorized texts. There was a curriculum that they studied that was the idea that if you learnt all this stuff, you were a wise or educated person, the idea of paideia. And paideia was very important, so if you weren't that, you weren't a proper man, say in the 2nd century AD. You were not educated, you weren't proper. So they had these texts in their heads. So when they were, and this happened for a very long time, this happened all the way back, yeah, from the 2nd century AD, way back to, and later than that, way back to the 4th century BC and earlier. They knew their texts immaculately. So when they wrote and they made a reference, they expected their readers to, from a paragraph level, from a word level, if they made one word that happened to be the form that was used in the Iliad, they expected you to get the entire context of what that word meant in the context of both that text and the Iliad. So when you're studying classics, you can't have the same recall as an ancient Greek or Roman person, because that, frankly, our cultural memory isn't like that anymore. And it's not like you can memorize these texts very easily. If you want to try, you can, but it's hard and there's a lot of them. But you at least need to read them. You need to be familiar with them. And the biggest two, that if you're going into studying history or ancient history or classics or even later history, is that you need to read the Iliad and you need to read the Odyssey. So the two Homeric epics, if you're studying any ancient text or any period or what is classed as ancient history or classics, you need to read Homer. You need to read these two, you need to be familiar with them, because every single text from these two onwards uses the Iliad and the Odyssey. Homer is the key text. If you're going into university, read them now, and you haven't read them before, read them now. You're gonna need them, because if you don't, you're gonna struggle, because literally every single text comes back to the Iliad and the Odyssey. If you want to study, say from my video from last week, I talked about Sparta. If you want to study Herodotus or Thucydides talking about Sparta, they use Homer in the Iliad. They use the Iliad when talking about warfare. If you want to read anything about Alexander the Great, you need to know the Iliad. If you want to know, Herodotus or travel writing or biographies, you're going to need the Odyssey, because they reference these two texts a lot. If you want to study, say again, Augustan Roman periods, you're going to read something like Ovid, and you're going to read something like Catullus, maybe if you're going a little bit earlier for Julius Caesar, or you're going to read Virgil's The Aeneid. And to be able to read Virgil's Aeneid, or Catullus, or Ovid, you need to have read the Iliad and the Odyssey first, because otherwise there are going to be cultural references that are very important to those subjects that will go way over your head. I cannot stress enough how important it is to read these two texts. Now, and obviously the later you go, the more text you're going to have to read to get a full understanding. For example, again, if you're reading Roman biography on war, you're going to have to read Thucydides at some point, or at least consider him, because he is a text that the Romans used. Even though he's Greek, the Romans used his work. If you're reading anything from the 2nd century, you're going to have to read some Plato. I had to read a lot of Plato. I don't even particularly like Plato, but any philosophy after a certain point, it's going to have to be Plato. Any literature that might even hint to philosophical points, you're gonna have some Plato in there. That's just how it is. Again, the epic poetry, you need these two. All of them need these two. But you're going to have to read outside of your comfort zone. And that is very hard, and that's very, and it's sometimes hard finding out exactly what you need. Again, the core two, the Iliad and the Odyssey, can't stress them enough, just go read them. Have a good understanding of them as well. Try and get some sort of understanding, maybe read some commentaries of them if you're not quite sure. And that's the sort of thing you need to do. It will make your life a million times easier in classics or ancient history, because ancient historians get this way sometimes too, when they're like, oh, I'm just going to read, say, Livy, and then don't read other historiographical texts, because they're just going off of Livy, but without understanding what Livy's influences were that really give a good understanding of his work. So just go out and do that. You will obviously get required reading, but again, try and read as much as you can around that, because it will get you a good idea, and it will make your essays better, it will make your understanding of the text better, it will make your understanding of the cultures better. So go and do that. For the Iliad and the Odyssey, chances are you'll have an option to study them in university. Read them beforehand. The chances are there will be translations that are recommended, but if you want to just read them this summer, the two that I recommend are the Richard Lattimore translations for both the Iliad and the Odyssey. They're on Amazon. Go check them out. Mainly why these two are quite good is because they actually reference the chapter and line references are to reference an ancient text as well. So in the original Greek, chances are it's a very uniform system. So if another text referenced the line references and chapter references in this, then it'll be in reference to the ancient Greek script. So the Lattimore translations are fantastic. I use the Penguin translations for Plato. There might be better translations out there, but that's the ones that I use. Plato comes up a lot. Chances are you might have to read some of him. That's pretty standard. If you're reading drama after a certain point, Euripides might be a standard. You do get these big chunks of texts that just rely on other chunks of text. I think I had it particularly extremely because I did study the ancient novels from the 2nd century, the ancient Greek novels from the 2nd century, and they rely so much on intertextuality, but other texts absolutely do. Other key reading that you're going to have to do for certain subjects, if you were doing Augustan Rome, which I've mentioned before in this video, try and track down a copy of the Res Augustae. which is a catalogue of Augustus's deeds that was written on a temple of Apollo, I think. Try and track that down. It'll make your life easier. It really will when you're studying this stuff. But yeah, those are just a few texts that I recommend absolutely getting your hands on, absolutely reading. Again, the main two, the Iliad and the Odyssey. You will need them. You might not think you'll need them, but you do. If you're studying ancient history or classics, it's not a non-argument, you need to read these. They are so important. So that's my sort of filibuster message for today. I'll be back next week talking about my actual subject which I studied in university, which required all of this intertextual reading. I'm going to talk a little bit about the ancient Greek novels. If you like this video, please like, share and subscribe. If there are any more absolutely key texts, if you've studied ancient history or classics or just sort of liked these ancient texts, recommend what you think are the key reading points down in the comments below, and I will see you next week. Yeah, see you then. Bye guys!